Good morning, everybody. I'm Kate Moore. Hi. This is exciting. We already have a bunch of people on. So thank you for taking the time to join us. We'll just let people for a few minutes log on, and then maybe we can do some introductions and get started. So happy Friday. I don't see anybody else coming. So maybe what we can do is start with introductions, and if people jump on, we can include them. And some of you have already started doing this, but if you haven't, in addition to our introductions, if you could put your name and agency and your email contact information, that would be super helpful for us to make sure we're tracking who attended the office hours. And then that helps us track who's with who. So thank you. So I'll get started. I'm Kate Moore. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Planning and Partnerships at ECHO. So ECHO is the Continuum of Care lead agency for Austin Travis County area. And we are super excited about doing this strategic plan. ECHO's about 11 years old, and to our knowledge has never had a strategic plan. So, I think it's high time that we dive into that. And we've been wanting it as an ECHO staff for a while. So I thought we'd start with introductions. I thought maybe ECHO staff can start, and then we can maybe popcorn it over, and people can popcorn it to each other. If you don't mind, that might be the easiest. So I'll turn it over to Maya to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maya Bideri. I'm the Coalition and Capacity Building Manager over at ECHO, and I will pass it on to Chris. Did you want to introduce yourself? Do you want to hang in the background?
Yeah, I'm just real quick, Chris. I'm the Communications Manager at ECHO and just here to lurk. So I guess I'll pass it to Emily.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Emily Wirtz. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here with Sarah and Samantha from Waking Giants, and great to be here. I will pass it to Maya. Did you
go? I did just go.
Oh, sorry. That's what, yeah. As soon as I said it, I was like, Kat, can you?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Catherine, she, her pronouns, and I am with Giant Squid Group LLC. We are a social impact consultancy that works through an anti-racist and feminist lens. And I'm also channeling Tara Levy, my amazing friend who is on a call. So she's here in spirit. And I wasn't paying attention to who went because it's Friday and coffee ran out. So who hasn't gone? Samantha. I think I heard your name and I was like, she already went. I call on Samantha.
Thanks, Kat. I will popcorn it over to Kiana after me. Kiana, if you're feeling ready. I'm Samantha Huggins, coming in from Waking Giants. I do kind of some structural architecture over at Waking Giants and am a facilitator. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I am getting over some bronchitis, so I don't normally sound like this. My name is Kiana Fisher. My pronouns are she and hers. I am part of the ECHO team and have been for the last 4 months, and I'm really excited about moving the strategic work forward.
I can go. My name is Sarah Bonds. I am one of the founders of Waking Giants. We're a social impact company based in Austin. I have known Ann Howard, who was the previous executive director at ECHO for a long time. Big fans. Our family has helped out with the counting that you do sometimes. And it's just been a really profound experience for our family in learning more about what it is to experience homelessness in Austin. And we're really excited to hear about what's motivating this new strategic plan and your vision moving forward and what you're looking for as priorities for the folks who submit their proposals. So it's nice to meet y'all. Happy Friday. Oh, and I'll pass it over to Kaylee and Christina.
Hi, my name is Kaylee Shockley. I use they, them pronouns. My business partner, Christina, is actually also on the call, so I will popcorn over, but we are here from Ad Consulting based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Christina?
Hi, good morning from Pittsburgh, really cold Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. As Kaylee said, I'm their partner at Ad Consulting, and we're really excited to learn more about ECHO and your goals and meet everybody else on the call. Thank you for having us.
I'll jump in. I'm Rhonda Rutledge with Mission Squared. It's founded in Austin, Texas by Meg Pogue, but I am an affiliate out here in Portland, Oregon. So it's not as cold as Pittsburgh, but it's colder than Austin. Great to see everybody this morning.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Olivet. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a co-founder of Racial Equity Partners and founder of JO Consulting. I'm also here representing my colleagues, Donald Whitehead and Kavita Singh Gilchrist. We are a mission-driven small business, minority-owned small business, doing work all over the country with organizations working in homelessness and housing. I've been in the homelessness field for more than 25 years and have been doing racial justice work that entire time. We are based in Washington, D.C., New York City, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, depending on who's on the call and what day it is. And it's really, really great to be here with you all. I've crossed paths with ECHO many times over the years, and I'm a big fan of what you all do and look forward to this conversation.
Thank you. I think we just had one new person join. Sky, welcome. We're doing just in time for introductions. We're just saying who we are, who we're with. I give Sky.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, sorry, Sky Downing here. Oh, I see Sarah Bonds on the call. Hi, Sarah. We used to work together. I am the former executive director of Austin Freenet and am doing some consulting now. And so just wanted to participate in this meeting to learn a bit more about this opportunity.
Great, welcome. Did we miss anybody? Not everybody? Great. So thank you everybody again for taking time and for your interest in our strategic planning RFP. So I thought I would start by telling you a little bit about ECHO and what our role is in the community, and then I would share my screen and go through the RFP a little bit. And that might be a good way to facilitate some questions from you guys. and feel free to ask questions anytime. I do want to say that this is being recorded, and we plan to post this on our website so that other people who weren't able to come to this or just didn't know about it would have the same opportunity to hear the conversation as well. So I guess leave now if you are uncomfortable being recorded. So ECHO, as I said, we've been around 11 years. We have 34 staff members. We are, we've had rapid growth in a nonprofit. And so we're kind of moving into that stage from rapid growth into a more mature organization. So it's a really good time for us to do a strategic plan. We have a very specific role that is HUD regulated in many ways within the community. So HUD manages a process called the Continuum of Care, and they require communities that want to receive Continuum of Care funds, which are funds primarily for providers who provide housing and related services to people experiencing homelessness in their communities. They require them to designate a Continuum of Care lead agency. And they require a governance to be created that is elected by their members or their stakeholders to make policy decisions for that continuum of care. And they require communities to create a HMIS lead agency. So HMIS, if you're not familiar with that, is the database that all providers in the homelessness sphere use. And it's a way for us to track data. So the HUD requires the governance to also designate a lead HMIS agency. And so ECHO is also the HMIS lead agency. So those are our designated HUD roles. We have over the years taken on additional things. We have, for instance, centralized vacancies. It's work that we've done. So what that means is that we help properties create access. We help providers who are working with people experiencing homelessness have access to properties and units in the private market, which is something that's a real big priority, for instance. And that's a space we've moved into. That's not a requirement by HUD. That's not a requirement of being a lead agency, but it's something that we've taken on. And I'm using that as an example of something that a strategic plan could help inform, right? And so there's going to be things at ECHO that we have to do, right? That we have to do as part of our continuum of care lead agency responsibilities. And then there's things that we could take on outside of that. And so I really see the strategic plan as a way for us to clarify our vision with that. So one of the things we talked about in the RFP that might be confusing if you're not real familiar with the continuum of care lead agency setup is that we essentially have two boards that ECHO staff kind of work with, which is a little confusing. So ECHO is a nonprofit, right? We're a 501c3 and we have a nonprofit board. So they have, like the other nonprofit boards, adopt our budget, could create agency policies. They hire and supervise our executive director, very similar to probably other nonprofits you've worked with in communities, right? And then, but what's different is that we are also, the reason that we were started was to support the continuum of care. And the continuum of care is governed by what's called the COC board. That's the HUD term, Continuum of Care Board. And in our community, we actually just re-envisioned that board, which is really exciting. Like it's being really centered in racial equity work and the expertise of people with lived experience. But it's meant a lot of change for our community. And that board, we also do staff support for. And we help them, we are responsive to them, but they are not leading the strategic plan, right? We would really like them to inform the strategic plan and to be consistent with their vision, but the strategic plan itself is for the ECHO nonprofit. So it will be mainly coordinated in conjunction with ECHO staff and the ECHO nonprofit board. So I think that might be if you're not familiar with homeless services or continuum care, but you've done strategic planning, that might be something that's a little new and confusing, is that we have these two boards that we're working with as ECHO staff and are accountable to in different ways. So what I thought I'd do is stop there because I talked a lot, and then offer the space for questions and conversation. And then I could pull up the RFP and maybe we could go through parts of it and we can make sure we cover any questions that you all have.
Kate, is there overlap between your nonprofit board and the COC board?
No, not currently. We have in the past, so that can happen. Like in the past, we've had the COC board chair attend our nonprofit board meetings. I don't think that they were a voting member, if I remember correctly. And then there was board members in the past, nonprofit board members who were also members of the COC board. But that in our new setup, that we had that recent change with governance. They don't have any intentional connection.
Okay, and you said you wanted to see the COC board maybe engaged as stakeholders in informing the process, but certainly not overseeing it. I'm curious how you see that engagement, and then also what you see as the role of your nonprofit board in the strategic planning process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, our nonprofit board, we really see this as the strategic plan for ECHO as a nonprofit. And that's the way we kind of often talk about the distinction is there's ECHO as the collaborative applicant, which is the continuum of care board responsibility. And then there's ECHO as a nonprofit. And those do have overlaps. They're not clean lines necessarily. And so Leadership Council leads all of the policies and procedures around us as a collaborative applicant and HMIS and all the responsibilities as being a continuum of care. So I see them really, that COC board really informing, how they see ECHO staff as a nonprofit, really being able to make an impact at helping their work or just helping move the work forward in the homelessness response system in general, right? So we really we need their expertise and their lens on that. But what's different in my mind is they don't own the strategic plan, so they won't be responsible for implementing it. They don't need to approve it. It's going to be owned by our board. And so that's what's going to be tricky, I think, about that is that we want something that is definitely extremely informed in some ways by Leadership Council, by our continuum of care board, and resonates with their values and their priorities, but it has to be owned by us as the nonprofit board. And I hope that helps. And Maya and Kiana might have additional thoughts as to. So Maya and Kiana, do you guys have anything to add to that? Poor Kiana, I shouldn't make her talk.
Kiana, you should rest your voice. I think I agree. I think the other piece that the continuum of care board will be helpful in is in kind of building that bridge with the community. I think one of the things ECHO has struggled with in this kind of rapid growth is misalignment with community expectations or understanding of what ECHO's role is. I think there's some confusion about ECHO being a service provider, which we are not. We don't provide direct services. We don't have housing or case management. And so with Leadership Council, the Continuum of Care Board being now restructured to be much more reflective of the community and increase community engagement, as well as the committees and work groups that report up to Leadership Council, I envision that as kind of a stronger connection to community stakeholders and being able to kind of build that communication and that partnership to clarify what ECHO's role is in the community and also clarify what the community's vision for ECHO's role is, because I think that's important as well.
Thank you. That was great, really helpful, all of you, thanks.
Kate, really quick related question. In addition to the nonprofit board collaborating with the COC board, what level of staff involvement, and like you mentioned, there's like the group of 34 staff, do you feel like they would be brought in for lots of the strategic plan, you know, parts of it, key parts? What kind of collaborative relationship do you feel like that plays?
For the ECHO staff particularly, how many would be
Yes.
involved? Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, we haven't made any decisions or really had intentional conversations about that. I mean, we know we've said we want ECHO staff involved. I think we would be open to hearing from the vendor who's selected also at what makes sense with their process. So yeah, no decision.
Perfect. Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna pull up the RFP.
Kate, I don't think I missed this in the proposal, but is there a hoped for timeline that you're wanting to have a plan completed?
Yeah, there's a mini timeline in the on page 5.
Yeah, I see summer. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah,
I
we're
glossed
hoping
over that.
summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, to have it done. And somebody had asked by email, like what time would we get started? We would hope to start in January. Like that's one of the reasons that we have the RFP out now. I'll go to the top. Yeah, that's great. Okay, go beginning. All right. Can you guys see that all right? Okay. So a lot of this we covered. This is like background we wanted to make sure that we provided about our governance. This is a little bit about our history and our budget. So like right now we have a current annual budget of about $3 million. And we wanted to kind of give you a sense, this part of the RFP is giving you a sense of trying to give you a sense of what are some key initiatives that we've taken on as staff without really the vision of a strategic plan, right? Like I see these could be types of things that if we had a strategic plan could help us know if this is the right type of thing we should be investing in as an organization or a right way to get our staff coordinated. You know, so for instance, one of the big things that we've taken on as an organization the past couple of years, I'll just go through a couple of these, is leading and trying to lead in the healthcare and criminal justice space and provide, we've created staff positions with intentional liaison capacities in those spaces, and to build partnerships so that we can build programming and supports for people experiencing homelessness that are intersecting with those institutions. And so that's been an intentional space. An intentional, a priority that has become a priority for us as staff, and as the board is working on as well, is that, you know, how do we understand the racial equity implications of our system? And so one of the pieces that we've done is really invest in staff and research and evaluation. So that's really looking at it from a systems level, but we've also been looking at it from a staff level and an organization level. And I would think that the strategic plan would help us think about how to integrate. And that's one of the key pieces you'll see woven throughout this, is how do we integrate racial equity into us as an organization? And how do we as an organization support weaving that into the homelessness response system and the goals of Leadership Council around that as well. So that's definitely a priority. We've been supporting Leadership Council, which is our new continuum of care board. Let's see, one of the key pieces that we've grown, and Kiana and Maya are actually two of our key lead staff members in this work, is working with intentional partnerships with community-based providers who've been traditionally excluded from the homelessness response system. particularly Black and Brown led organizations, and they've done some really amazing work at getting new providers into this space. And I know we really want to think about how does our strategic plan inform that work, or should it inform that work? Let's see, we do a lot of work, or have thought a lot, at least, how to support the private rental market access. Like, it's a huge issue in our community of if we have people have subsidies, so they have rental assistance and they have services. A lot of times they're not project based, but they're have to be used in the private rental market. It's like, what is our role at ECHO? It's supporting that work. So I won't go through all of these necessarily. Maybe what you can do is tell me if you have questions about this. I think one of the things that, Maya did a really great job talking about is that, these rapid changes and growth kind of have happened without a strategic plan, and I think has caused some uncertainty and some confusion in different spaces around, like, what is the role of ECHO? And so I think thinking about, like, not only should this be the strategic direction, but like using these as examples, but then, like, how can we clearly define ourselves to the community? So it's also a communication piece. So Maya and Kiana, or I don't want to put Kiana on the spot to talk. Maya, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't. I think that was a good overview. If folks have questions, we can absolutely add more detail.
I just wanted to add just briefly that there is we're recognizing, as we're doing some community engagement, is that we have some healing to do, or some trust building to do with communities of color, as not only as an organization and as a COC. And so I would hope that work, like Maya said, that's part of, our what comes from the work of the COC board and that new governance structure, but also as a nonprofit, recognizing that we have some healing work to do with communities of color, and making that a key point of us moving forward with strategically.
Thank you, Kiana. And I noticed we have a new ECHO staff person on here. Andrew, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm late. Always something going on. I am the procurement and performance manager under Kiana. I work, and Kate, and I work alongside Maya. So thank y'all for being here. We're really excited for the interest.
Thanks, Andrew. So before we move on to a different section, does anybody have any more questions about this? Or
Kate, super quick, when was ECHO's last strategic plan?
As far as I know, we've never had a strategic plan.
All right.
I've only been at ECHO 3 years, and I'm not aware of one.
Cool. And this might be a kind of looking for guidance from consultants type question also, but do you all imagine that you are looking to overhaul mission, vision, and philosophy during this, or work under those existing?
Oh, I think we anticipate revisiting those.
Great.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to keep going down. Okay. So here's a piece. So, we put on here 3 to 5 years because we really I think we'd be interested in what the vendor thinks. Like, does it make sense for us to have a 3-year strategic plan, or, some people have longer strategic plans. Update like you mentioned, the mission, vision, philosophy of service. Really creating a clear roadmap for the culture shift necessary for ECHO staff, particularly around centering racial equity, will be really important for us. Another piece is to help us think about benchmarks and metrics to meet the goals associated with the strategic plan. One of the pieces that Maya touched on a little bit is like our sometimes we're seen as having a conflict of interest with providers, and sometimes we're seen as maybe providing services as staff. We've been intentionally trying to really get out of that space of doing anything that is seen as direct services and really leaning into the support role. But I think, that's one thing we're really we want to make sure is that with the community that we're clearly in a lane that the community and the continuum of care board and really want us to be in. So, and to mitigate any conflicts of interest. Let's see. Yeah, operational needs is a huge thing for us that we've been struggling with at ECHO. Like I think probably many nonprofits that are kind of moving from that like small startup to like a more mature organization. We really are also extremely outward facing as an organization. We're constantly meeting with community members. We're meeting with city council. We're just we've prioritized that, I believe, whether intentionally or not, to do that work. And I think our internal operations have suffered, especially as we've grown. So we really want the strategic plan to help us prioritize that as well. When we're thinking about like IT needs and HR support and things like that, like how do we make sure that we are taking care of ourselves as an agency and taking care of our staff so that we can do this work well. So we also are, the last piece is really important on here. I want to mention one of the pieces that staff have talked about is how can we find ways, and we've been working on this, it's starting to work on this with a new hire that we have, new position that we have, is how do we build out a structure for authentic inclusion of people with lived expertise, right? Like how do we not just play lip service to that and as a nonprofit, right? So we're intentionally working on that in governance and the continuum of care board, and Maya and Kiana have been really leading in that space, and like, but how do we do that as well as a nonprofit and make sure that we're integrating that? So those are the main goals. Any questions about that before we move on? Okay. So this is the scope of work. Probably a lot of this, if you've done strategic planning, it looks fairly similar to what you've seen before. And so we want some research and SWOT analysis. We want the vendor to be out there hearing from the community, and that could be surveys, focus groups, interviews, key stakeholder interviews. And we've had quite a few questions about what needs to be done in person versus what needs to be done virtually. And I would say at this point, we're really open to what you guys propose. I think that especially the future of the pandemic is uncertain at this point. And so we're also pretty flexible about plans may change. You may intend and want to do something in person, and then a new variant comes out, and we're flexible about that. We are all, just so you know, working remotely at ECHO right now. We have just started kind of occasionally having some meetings in person. And part of that is that we had our lease expire at the end of May last year. And so we were all working like 95% remotely anyway at that point. So we decided to just let that lease space go because it wasn't really meeting our needs anyway. So that's one of the things that we hope to take on in 2022 is helping our nonprofit find a new space that will work for us. We don't anticipate being completely remote for the future. Okay. Any questions before I move on about the scope? And ECHO staff, feel free to interrupt and add if you think I haven't covered something, but I feel it's important. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about qualifications. We've really thought intentionally about this, thinking about what would be pieces that we would want to require as qualifications and pieces that are preferred qualifications, but not necessarily required. So Strategic planning expertise and change management is something we would like to have. Another priority is expertise in applying a racial equity lens to strategic planning. Organizational change management, we would like somebody who understands community-based research and comparable equity type of impact work. So that's a priority for us. Obviously, strong facilitation skills is something that you need with a strategic planner. Somebody who's experienced at gathering and using research, racial equity analysis, SWOT analysis, and best practices to help us with the planning process. And some experience with using system users, right? Is that we're kind of in a unique position here at ECHO, and that compared to some nonprofits, and that we have a lot of other system users like that we interact with, and a lot of other nonprofits or boards or organizations. So just some experience doing that. Some preferred qualifications that we thought would be helpful, but we thought wasn't necessarily required, would be familiarity with the homelessness response system, and understanding of federal guidelines and responsibilities that we have as an organization, because we are the collaborative applicant and the HMIS lead agency. An understanding of racial disparities in the homelessness response system and the roles of nonprofits in promoting and leading racial equity. So it's kind of pushing that racial equity qualification just a step further, is that it would be really awesome if we had somebody that, in addition to understanding how racial equity lens can impact strategic planning, is if there was somebody who also understands how racial equity impacts the homelessness response system. So somebody who had a background in areas, intersecting areas of justice and equity, somebody that has lived experience, whether that's like thinking about firms particularly that have staff or people with lived expertise, whether that's in homelessness or housing stability or poverty, that's become a value of ours, and we're interested to see if we can find a vendor that also has that. And then experience in creating an equitable environment, especially considering positions of power, and how do we create that? So ECHO staff, did I capture that right? Anything missing? Okay. Any questions about that? All right, so here's the timeline we discussed. Due 30th. We hope to get a decision turned around pretty quickly. We wanted to get it done before the holidays, the December holidays start, and then get started in January, and then be done in summer-ish. That's what we're thinking. And then this is the proposal submission. We tried to leave flexibility, knowing that you may have just one firm that's doing this. You may be an independent consultant. You may be several firms working together. Like we don't want to limit how you're doing that. We just ask that you give us, if you're doing that, if you're putting together a lot of different groups, that you just give us one point of contact, just so we know who's the lead. And then this is just saying that we really want you to describe, when you're giving us your proposal, your qualifications, including your expertise, your knowledge, and your experience, and thinking about what we're looking for in our qualifications. We tried to keep the work plan fairly straightforward, and so really, what we're looking for is just really what's your overall vision. What's your scope? What's your philosophy of consulting? Like, what do you, how will you approach this work? What are the specific things that you would propose accomplishing? What are the particular activities conducted at each stage, and a timeline for those? What are certain milestones, so we can kind of see, okay, this happens then, and then you expect this to happen, and how those milestones eventually get us to a strategic plan. And then deliverables that we would get along the way from you guys, tied to those milestones. And we would like to see a budget by milestone if we could, because that would really help us kind of understand the impact of like what you're potentially charging with what you're proposing. I think that's why we put that in there. And then references, just some folks that can speak to your work would be helpful. So Echo staff, did I miss anything there that was important? No, okay. They're so nice at validating me, aren't they? So any questions about that?
Yeah, this is Sarah. I have a question about the budget. Do you guys have a budget range?
Oh yeah, that's another big question that people keep asking. And I think it sounds like people aren't really happy that we don't. And so I apologize if that makes your work harder. We're not really trying to make it harder. We don't. We do have funding. I don't know if it's helpful to say. We do have funding. We do have a budget. We have money for this. We just haven't put out and said intentionally, we know that, this is the amount it has to come under. So, we're really interested to see, based off of the scope of work that we've put out, what you think it would cost.
Okay, can I jump in here?
Please, yes.
I think that one of the things that that nonprofits do a lot is that we assume we know what something costs on the front end. And because I've had the opportunity to do a couple of these RFPs for specifically around strategic planning and racial equity work, is that nonprofits often handicap ourselves with whatever our assigned budget is. And so we put ourselves in a position where we either get people that know what the work costs and know we can't afford it, and so they don't apply, or the agencies or contractors that are really looking to do the work within that budget and really trying to make it work. And so what I appreciate about this opportunity is that vendors will absolutely get to tell us what this intentional, thoughtful, engaging, community involved work, what that really looks like and what it really costs. And then for us as a nonprofit to say, can we meet that? Is that what we want, and can we meet that? So I know it's frustrating, and I'm excited that we're doing it a little different than I've done it in the past.
Well, I appreciate the transparency. I also appreciate that what you are asking us to do is to tell you how much this actually costs, rather than to try to fit it into a box that is a sort of circumstantial box based on budget, et cetera, on your end. So thank you for your transparency about that. And we will tell you how much it costs.
Okay, I think we're almost at the end. So really submit, this is my email, so it just comes to me. Oh, sorry, it looks like Andrew had something.
Well, I noticed that Christina came off mute. I wanted to see if, I think you were like waiting for time to cut in, so.
Yeah, thanks for seeing me out there. Always awkward trying to fit in. So first of all, I love this idea. So yeah, and thanks for sharing that as well. I wish I would have thought to do this when I was working at agencies. In terms of travel, so if it is a mix, and again, being totally cognizant of COVID and the times, would you like to just see that folded within the budget and maybe like by milestones and meetings? Would that be the best way to present travel to you guys?
Yeah, I think we're really open. I think it might be helpful for us to see, for the travel to be like bylined in some way, so we know what's travel versus other expenses. That way, if things do change, we can kind of get a sense of how that would impact the budget.
And sorry, just one more question. I was thinking about, I believe, Kiana, you had mentioned that there's a lot of, trust building and relationship fostering that has to be done with the community. And I know that one of the most important things in our process is the community and people that are experiencing homelessness or accessing the services are a big part of the stakeholders who, get to inform the plan. Have you thought about what that looks like considering the relationship currently and how to, if there's a respectful way to do that?
So, I mean, I think that there's definitely, we definitely have ideas as staff team.
Okay.
Both Maya and I's position were created really to be more community engagement. We don't really have a strategy as an organization about how we fully engage them in our work. I mean, and then when you add in the kind of systematic harm into communities of color, that predates both me and Maya, that predates Kate.
Right.
That so I definitely think that what I would love to see is that it's part of our strategy of moving forward to not only and it's absolutely going to need to be kind of like any transformational change is going to need to be slow and organic and in a way that honors kind of both harm that's been done and our plan to course correct, but just making that part of our strategy of doing the work that we do. Just naming those things and making it part of the work that we do.
Great. Thank you very much.
I'll leave space for somebody else to jump in.
I can't have silence for more than 5 seconds, but I do want to also speak to like, I think historically the role that ECHO has played in our community, both as kind of a facilitator of the system and as an oversight of the system and supporting the governance of the system, has hit a lot, and in some instances being the public face of the system.
You missed my intro, Andrew.
Oh, did I? Did you cover all this already? Yeah. Then yeah, Kate probably talked to it all, but I think that's the most difficult and complex work of this is we play so many roles in so many different spaces, and it is very difficult and nuanced, especially when like how do we figure out our own identity and through line through all of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate making sure that we covered that. Okay, well, I really appreciate everybody's time and enthusiasm and interest in helping our organization with our strategic plan and helping us support our homeless response system. It's really important work, and we really appreciate you thinking about potentially taking it on. So feel free, though, this does not have to be your last opportunity to ask questions. You have my email on here, so please contact me anytime. I am going to be out. I didn't think about this. Maybe I'll put on my out of office somebody, because I'm going to be out next week, and you might be working on this, so I hope you don't have to, and you get to enjoy your Thanksgiving. But I will put somebody on my out of office. So if you don't catch me, I will put somebody that's available. All right, everybody, it's Friday. I hope you get to enjoy some of your weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.